Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Left 4 Dead. Let's continue. So we're in the second scenario where we are moving through more street levels, I suppose, instead of, well, no, it's more rural environment, I suppose, more forested environments. There were streets in the first scenario too, and there's just a little bit less buildings, even though, of course, all the safe rooms are still going to be in the same buildings. The question really to ask there, I think, is if you were to do this as a regular game, you would have us do a inside a building section, and then you would have us do an outside the building section, and then you would come around and do another inside the building section, or a third type of section. You really vary the whole thing up, where it kind of feels like these scenarios, because of the age of this game, couldn't load as many textures, and so you have a scenario where you have a scenario here where when they needed trees and bushes, they had to unload anything that looked like a building, or half the car pallets, which are seeing a lot here. I'm definitely playing this game more as a yeah, I'm definitely playing this game more as an action game now. And yeah, I feel like the AI director itself kind of has that desire, so that you play the game like an action game. Also, and I'm just moving fairly fast here and running around. I like this idea. I wish the game Zombie had a little bit more of this, from what I vaguely recall of the game Zombie. But then again, if I was to say I wish that the game Zombie had more of the fast running zombies running towards you, then I would have to also counter that by saying I wish about 5 to 20 of the gameplay mechanics in Zombie were in this game, because there was a lot there. You had the whole cricket bat thing, you had more safe rooms, you had missions, you had loot boxes. We're just looking all around here. Some of those bushes are definitely easy to mistake. This game is still fairly too dark. And the problem with it being so dark is that it really is more of a it's more of a action game, so I would kind of want to see I kind of want to see a scenario here where there were Resident Evil style monsters in specific places, big boss battles, and that's just not here at all. There, I've gotten another achievement. It's weird that you get the sound effects playing when you get an achievement, because that sound really should not play. or at least it should be separately adjustable, because I definitely would not want to be in the middle of a multiplayer game focusing on whether or not the music is implying that a horde is about to run, which the music does try to give you clues as far as whether you're about to run into a horde or not. Yep. So yeah, I would definitely appreciate more of a, like, you've made it to a certain area. This certain area is, let's see. I'm gonna take these pills and this pipe bomb. We're getting more light sources by lantern. I think there might be a witch somewhere around here.
Boomer!
Okay. So I was trying to experiment there with the idea of leaving them alone. And it seems like you get more zombies attacking you because of you setting off an alarm than you do actually getting having a bile spit on you. Boomer. Blowing up things for kind of no reason.
Got a weapon here.
Let's see, do we go that way?
Pipe bomb.
Or do we work our way around here? Yeah, it definitely feels like the city in the first section had a little bit more design. You would have a desk like this that would have like a cash register, and there would be a vending machine, there'd be soda machines. All of that seems to be mostly kind of missing here, and we are just using some building textures, maybe not even that many building textures, and yeah, suppose a remaster of this game probably would use more textures, and or try and load all the textures that would have been available in the entirety of throughout the entirety of the game. Alright, I'm just gonna throw that really far. If you were to remaster this game, there is an idea certainly around possibly mixing this up, certainly. That a randomization mode would make a lot of sense if you're not really having to, if you've lowered the load times considerably. But here's the problem with this. as long as this is a Source Engine game and Valve's involved and all, Valve is going to want this to be remastered in Source 2, which is the still, I think even at now, I would guess, unfinished, really unpolished engine. So a remake effectively on Source Engine 2 of this would probably try to be as flashy as possible and just like double the amount of textures on screen, the amount of 3D models, the amount of zombies. You certainly could add some fairly standard things to this game, and there's no way that I could complain about it. For instance, you could have it so each player holds each of the weapons. Each player picks up different kinds of bullets in different areas. So you have to balance it out. I mean, that would drastically improve the gameplay loop here. Certainly is like there isn't an ammo mechanism really in this game at all. You just in one location or two. Oh. That one, they took forever to save me. I'm just downing the pills more and more. Yeah, but if you took out the AI element of it deciding whether and well, it's not really where. Let's just be honest about it. The truth of the matter is, you have very specific spots where things can spawn that have been pre-programmed, and it is simply a matter of whether the game decided, the AI director has decided or not to have and allow something to spawn there. But the spawn spots themselves are totally programmed. They are totally obvious. We never run into a scenario where something is way in the wrong place or way in an area that really couldn't reach. And yeah, I've seen plenty of other games where you would just run out of bullets.
Hey, take this.
And then you'd have to switch to the other game, the other guns. By the game forcing you to switch to your other guns, you then have to play differently. Does this end, or is there an actual path over here? You'd almost assume that this fence in these sections here.
Wasn't this the alley you were born in? Yeah, this is the one you're gonna die in.
Interesting that there's a specific line of falling action dialogue. That's, I suppose the writer had to write something, so I can't really complain too much.
Ammo here.
Let's go ahead and
Watch my
heal.
back.
and see what healing with pills activated does. Seems like they don't really work. So I probably should have healed quite a while ago. That way I could have saved the pills. But playing on easy, you get enough. That it's really the pills that are pretty much the only thing that are changing. Well, that went poorly. That went very, very poorly.
Reloading.
I'm reloading.
And inevitably, that's a problem that you're gonna just constantly run into with this game. Is that there is just at any point a chance that the AI is gonna get bored and decide to throw a lot of zombies at you, and if you drop the ball, then you're gonna die.
Grabbing a Molotov.
They seem to never really I think that was a smoker, and I think there's a boomer over there walking around.
Reloading.
Meanwhile, over here, and they've pretty much decided to not put any zombies at all and just have it empty. And I assume in some scenarios that wouldn't be the case. As I'm wandering around, the smokers deciding to
Grenade.
It's funny they say grenade when and that's not really what's going on. Guess I run back here and we'll go ahead and grab another Molotov and we'll see if we can work our way through this whole area. Okay.
Reloading.
That doesn't set off an alarm. I'm
Reloading.
getting fairly quiet here. Alright, well, let's see if we can throw that right at the door
Got it.
and see if that kills a boomer. And then if maybe we can wander past the witch and not startle her. See, this would be the point where you would want this to...
Hold up. That witch is getting ready to pounce.
So, did they just kill the witch without me? Or did we manage to actually walk past her and not startle her?
I feel like you guys look.
Francis seems to be sick or near death. Which I don't understand why then.
Wait up, this will only take a second.
Yeah, I don't know why I have to walk next to Francis so that Zoe will heal him. That seems odd in single player to have to pull that off. We are, I don't think, going down to the sewers. So, which way are we going? I guess this way. Yeah. Because we're playing this as an action game, I feel like we may be going in circles, but they may just be copying and pasting content so much that it just feels like that. Alright, pipe bomb. No pills. These items you hold temporarily. They're gonna have us jump over that truck into that area, it seems. And that's interesting enough, I'd say. But see, unlike a regular action game where they would let you potentially take a break and prepare for the next big battle, this game just like straight up punishes you. It straight up tells you you have to keep moving forward, because not because the player's getting bored, which more modern games, lots of modern games where it's really hard to recognize, but more modern games will detect whether the player is getting bored or whether it thinks the player is getting bored. But this comes from the perspective of not the idea that the player is getting bored, that it's that the AI director is getting bored, and that's fairly ridiculous. Or you could say that the AI director is simply implementing the will of the creators of the game, and so effectively the creators of the game have procedurally programmed rules of when they feel like the game is getting bored of the player, instead of the player getting bored with the game. We're gonna start a generator, which will undoubtedly make a lot of noise.
Reloading.
There is a lot of weirdness, certainly, around the fact that you've got, I guess these are,
Let's take it.
That lift won't come down until
we're gonna steal a zombie-proof truck, basically. More of these guys look military, so that's the one slight difference now. But the military zombie people aren't any tougher. They don't have guns. They don't randomly accidentally shoot a gun in any random direction, where that would be fairly funny actually in a zombie game, is where it wasn't really a case of that, where it wouldn't really be a case of the zombie being intelligent enough to fire a gun at people. It would just be a case of the random spasms of someone. See, this time you have to hold down a button, whereas previously you didn't. So that feels slightly different.
Watch it! Watch it!
We'll just go ahead and reload.
Ready.
Notice how I got stuck on the geometry there. Let's see if we can get some zombies potentially under the area so that they would get squashed. There's a whole gun up here. How was I supposed to get up there? Let's see. I can hear the audio playing, and it sounds like we're gonna get a big enemy. Alright. Go and heal ourselves. Another one? Like, this is a big area. Clearly there's supposed to be a large number of enemies and big bosses taking this on, but on easy, at least they're struggling to do anything with that. This truck is just taking its sweet time. These are very cliched video game boss battles where you just have to wait. Well, you haven't seen anybody pull this gimmick in quite a few years because it's not fun. It's just frustrating. It also kind of fights in the idea of this being a multiplayer game because holding the station
Reloading!
there we go.
We need to restart the generator.
This guy's gonna just beat him to death.
Ammo here!
Ready.
Watch my back! Outstanding!
And see, there's not really a lot of reason why you
Ammo here!
need to wait. There's a zombie body. It's crushed. At Sanctuary, come out, get in. And yeah, playing that on easy was a lot easier than playing that on normal. I didn't die at all in these two sections. There is less there, certainly, so it would have made a lot of sense for this section to be broken up and put in between other sections. Like half of the city that we went through to get to Mercy Hospital could have been one city, and then we could have traveled through this section to get to the car, and then we could have ended up using using the helicopter later. I think the fight on the roof is a much more difficult fight. It seems like nearly the same amount of zombies though died. And see, these are supposed to be like grunge core, or is that the, I don't know if that's the right phrase. They're supposed to be kind of like movies that aren't to be really taken seriously. Grindcore, I think. Grindhouse movies. That's the name of the phrase I'm looking for. So yeah, theoretically, we could then do developer commentary and see if we could go anywhere else and do developer commentary, but it seems like it actually is only in the first scenario that there even is developer commentary, which is interesting. So that puts me kind of in a great place. It would be interesting, certainly, if there were add-ons to this game that modernized it, let you carry all the weapons, had different types of ammo. But then at a certain point, that's not what Left 4 Dead is. That's what somebody else has made to improve this idea. And at a certain point, there's not really a good reason to make an add-on for Left 4 Dead to change it drastically versus just make a game like Dead Space or Resident Evil 4 or your own version of that. Let's see. We could look at the achievements here that we've gotten. We beat a campaign with all 4 survivors. I guess these are probably chronological. We survived the Crash Course campaign. We lit a tank with a Molotov. We blew up 20 infected in a single thing. We've made 100 headshots now. But we've overall just gotten 11 out of 73 achievements, and a lot of these are not going to work. Alright, so since we have some extra time, let's go and do the developer commentary. Sure, we can play as random. We'll start at the subway, and we'll start the game. It seemed very much to me that the developer commentary scripts how the game really goes. So
through playtesting, we found that Left 4 Dead's unique cooperation mechanics were tricky even for seasoned gamers to grasp immediately. Failing because of rules that are not clear is never fun. Therefore, we designed the game instructor system to educate players as quickly as possible. Because first-time players can potentially join an in-progress game at any point, it was critical that the game instructor dynamically interpret game events. It keeps a running list of the lessons that can be taught in the current context and displays the ones that are most important. It also tracks how many times the player has successfully demonstrated that they've learned the lesson. Once the player has proven competence at any specific lesson, the hint is never shown again.
And see, that's nice, and that's a feature that I kind of wish was in a few more games, but it is pretty much standard for a AA or higher or AAA game.
Reloading!
What you don't have, though, and this is a problem with a lot of features that potentially would be in a game, is just the option to say, don't give me any hints at all. And that gets compounded with the idea that you're not given the option to turn off some of these heads-up displays, which if you really wanted to make this a horror game, you probably would want to at least fade them out if not completely dismantle or disallow the heads-up display. Let's see. And I doubt there's really going to be any major, like, secret things as far as director commentaries nodes. If anything, I suspect we are going to just continuously see more commentary nodes in fewer and fewer places.
Left 4 Dead evolved some of the contextual dialogue technology that we used in the Orange Box. Each survivor has a large database of lines to choose from based on their present activity and a variety of factors, such as their health, stress level, kinds of special infected seen so far, and many others. Each line can potentially trigger an automatic response from another character, allowing rich conversations to be dynamically generated based on the player's history together in the game so far.
That totally so far has not seemed to be the case. We've had the occasional sentence or two said with somebody, whoever's standing closest, I assume, giving a general response. Well, I guess there are military guys. I just didn't notice them. I would almost 100% prefer to be a scripted story that pops up where it is much more, a lot more is said and much more important stuff is said. But yeah,
Another
rich
way we try and give
conversations.
players a new experience every time they play Left 4 Dead is that in addition to randomly placing bonus items like pain pills and pipe bombs, we vary the location of the more powerful weapons: the auto shotgun, the assault rifle, and the hunting rifle. These weapons will always appear somewhere in the main path, but there are 4 different areas in the subway station where they can spawn. This means that players can't take these positions for granted on repeated playthroughs, and must keep their eyes open for the weapon upgrades.
Well, okay. I guess that highlights the variety, the level variety you'll get. It doesn't really matter as long as you're playing single player, and this is another example of compromise to make it a multiplayer game first and foremost, because as long as you're playing the game linearly, because you have to do it that way pretty much in single player to experience the game in any sensical way, you're always going to get the upgraded weapons in that first chapter unless you just totally miss them, and then you're going to have them with you for the rest of the game. Whereas it would potentially have made some sense to have the characters have to reset and leave their weapons in between each safe house, or or possibly have a weapon stealing character. That might be an interesting twist too, certainly, as if there was just a zombie style that could steal weapons from you. But you could also just have storyline reasons. You could say when you get to every shelter you find somebody who's been injured, somebody that you have to leave behind, somebody who's very young, and you hand the guns over to them. That would probably get fairly repetitive if you did that at every shelter. It'd be, you could do almost a comedy thing where there was a take a weapon, leave a weapon scenario.
Reloading.
And so you left your weapons for potentially bonus points even. It could just be gamified. Alright, well, we do see a
Although
thing
it
over
sounds
there.
ridiculous to talk about advanced zombie AI, we spent a great deal of time on the AI systems for the common horde. First and foremost is their ability to navigate. The environments in Left 4 Dead are geometrically complex and littered with breakable and movable objects. One of the design goals for the zombie horde was that there can never be a place where a survivor can stand that a zombie cannot navigate to. To make this happen required not only robust pathfinding code, but also path-following algorithms as well. These path followers have to continuously evaluate the local geometry around them and decide whether to crouch, stand, jump, climb over, and otherwise navigate nearly arbitrary environmental obstacles.
And I will say the Unreal Engine 5 has a very nice, like, procedurally generated animation pathfinding mechanic where you can jump over, have a character jump over a, say, rail, or you could have them jump over, say, the entire length of a train, and it just procedurally animates the same scripted sequence so that it makes sense visually. But yeah,
Discovered Body is an example of how we tell a
pathfinding
story
is
in the
half
worlds without
math
using any words or overt storytelling.
as much as it is
We
just
wanted to
standard
show that there are other
gameplay,
people
video
involved
game
that are
programming.
survivors like you. We figured most people wouldn't survive very long, and you'd come across their bodies. But we needed a way to set these apart from all the dead ragdolls of the common infected. By simply covering a body with a blanket or a sheet, it becomes really obvious that this guy had a buddy, a friend. And when he went down, his friend had compassion and covered him up. This also tells a story about the state of the world, that they wouldn't want to go out and bury the body. They couldn't expose themselves to infected. So they'd have the bodies right there with them, but covered. Sometimes you'll see a covered body right outside a checkpoint. So it's like they were in a safe area, and maybe during the night their buddy died from his wounds. So the next morning, the other survivors didn't really want the body in there with them, so they dragged it outside. This was the best they could do for the guy.
This is so laughable. Because I totally missed this. I didn't see this at all. This is in the darkness. Like, all I see, and all I think most players would see, is this bright white table with bullets and, last time we played it, guns on it. So why in the world would you be able to, would you put this here? If this was supposed to be environmental storytelling, it's just terrible placement. Plus, it's, for lack of a better term, just kind of an example of somebody's pet project and somebody being extremely proud of their pet project of deciding that they needed to animate the dead bodies with blankets over them. I bet even looking for it, we won't be able to see more than 3 dead bodies covered in a blanket. In the rest of the playthroughs. But yeah, it really is just like a laughable effort. And I know that person was probably very proud of it, but to me it is just nothing.
Smoking the set is a common film technique used to help separate background and foreground. We use particles
If
and
anything, it
distance-based
highlights
fog to do
that
our own version of smoking.
there really isn't any story
Our first
here, so they were
experiments proved
desperately trying to
frustrating
add
for
story
players.
through
We used a realistic
visual
dark
storytelling,
fog, but this
environmental
obscured character
storytelling.
silhouettes and gave no sense of the vast surrounding environment. Once we lightened up the fog, the maps gained a greater sense of scale and distance, and the readability of characters greatly improved, so the players could more easily tell friend from foe. Fog also helped players spot important events, like zombies climbing over distant fences. So changes in visual design not only improved the look of the maps, but aided players in anticipating and coordinating their team ahead of attacks.
The one thing I will say the developer commentary has going for it is it does turn down the bullet sound effect, which, man, you just hear this bullet sound effect way too much. Like, yeah, I feel like what I imagine a lot of parents feel like, where their kids are just playing some first-person shooter and all they're hearing is gunshot
Early
after
playtesting
gunshot
revealed
after
that
gunshot.
Players often didn't know that other survivors were in need of help, even though the status of the other survivors at the bottom of the screen changed to red. When being attacked by a horde of zombies, we found players focusing exclusively on the in-game action and missing any changes to the HUD and the other player's status. We solved this problem by using glows around the silhouettes of the survivors' character models. We use red glows when other survivors are in need of assistance, and blue glows to show the survivor's location when hidden behind walls or far away.
Yeah, that's another example of something I have yet to see. I've certainly seen the blue glows, but if I wanted to play this as a horror game, I would want that turned off. Honestly, if I was playing this as a horror game, I'd want these three people just missing completely. But at the very least, I'd like to be able to lose them. And so, yeah, you get a slightly different location for where the weapon was. That's not much of a change as far as randomization. And otherwise, the path is all the same.
In Left 4 Dead, players carry flashlights to illuminate the environment. These shadow-casting light sources not only add surface richness and provide important visual depth cues, they tie into gameplay. For example, because a player's flashlight is attached to his or her weapon, the light becomes pointed off to the side when reloading or performing a shove attack. In a sufficiently dark area, this can cause the player to be effectively blind until they are done reloading or shoving back an enemy. Like so many of Left 4 Dead's game mechanics, this encourages cooperation, as players know they may be left in the dark if they choose to reload at the wrong moment.
And that only works if the player doesn't decide to just turn up the brightness. There was a game I played relatively recently called Control, where you were in a building, and so I would say 97% of the game is all in this building environment, fighting the same 4 or 5 types of enemies. So I would, I guess, say that at least in the example of Control, there is a comparison of boring gameplay and repetitive gameplay. That being said, that's not really a good thing, and I really did not enjoy Control or that element in part of Control.
Before there were rescue
Control
closets,
did
survivors who died during the
establish
game had to
with
wait until the next checkpoint before they could rejoin.
ray tracing
As the game matured, the time between
visuals,
checkpoints
which
reached
made
10
it look
to
very
15
pretty.
minutes, clearly too long for a player to sit in spectator mode. Although it may seem obvious now, it wasn't really clear how to bring dead survivors back into the game in a simple and believable way. Once we hit on the mechanic that you're rescuing a survivor who has barricaded himself in, the problem was solved. This solution is typical of Left 4 Dead game mechanics. Hearing a trapped friend call for help creates a dramatic situation for the survivors and creates a new short-term goal for the team to accomplish. Also, finding a lone survivor that joins your team is a staple of the horror movie genre. Finally, it provides plenty of opportunities throughout the environment to bring dead players back into the game.
I guess I'll have to play a little bit online to see that, because I thought you just respawned and walked out of this area yourself, but it seems like what they're saying is that when you respawn, you are at this door and one of the other players has to open the door for you. Of course, if you were going to do this in a more modern way, and I hate to keep saying Unreal Engine is the way to go, but it really is. Unreal Engine has a lot of custom character creation, and so there's a lot of room potentially for why did that bounce back this way? There would be a lot of room for random characters instead of 4 very bespoke character models. which that might be interesting.
Powder bomb.
And certainly, I think Zombie did, as a game, have that as a feature where there was some randomization amongst the zombies you were fighting that just kind of procedurally generated. Certainly, you could see that. I mean, it's not hard at all to imagine having a zombie miss an arm procedurally, or lose a leg procedurally, or have a red shirt instead of a blue shirt instead of a green shirt. And so it seems like we need to clear out this whole area first.
We set out to create an interesting trade-off between the pipe bomb and the Molotov from day one. Given the limit of a single item in your inventory, the choice needed to be meaningful. From early on, the Molotov was a clear winner, providing a dynamic area of denial with interesting strategic purposes and pitfalls, especially against the boss infected. The pipe bomb was intended to provide a balance against a rampaging horde, but initially it proved far less successful. Given the frenetic pace of enemies in action in Left 4 Dead, with typical engagement ranges of 5 to 10 feet, using a traditional pipe bomb in any sort of intentional way was nearly impossible. You'd see a mob of zombies, whip out the pipe bomb, and by the time you're winding up for a throw, they'd already be eating your face. No amount of tweaks to the detonation mechanic or timing solved this issue. It simply wasn't fun. Given that the horde is drawn to shrill, high-pitched sounds, we decided to take the homemade nature of the pipe bomb one step further and attach the guts of a smoke detector onto it. This provided just the element that the weapon needed. Against mobs, you now have the ability to draw them to a point and destroy them. It has the strategic advantage of being able to deflect an incoming rush from a user or a teammate who's being overwhelmed, and rarely feels like a wasted opportunity when used. Now when presented with a pipe bomb and Molotov trade-off, you have to weigh what situation you're more worried about facing next, and how the rest of your team is outfitted. The mechanics of the weapon help to reinforce fictional elements within the world while falling in line and fulfilling our initial goals for its purpose. And seeing a bunch of zombies turn into goopy red mist as the result of a big explosion never hurts either.
Crescendo events were the result of a lot of playtesting. Playtesters really love the finales, but since it can take like an hour or so to get to each one, they were missing these kinds of intense experiences along the way. What playtesters liked most about the finale was that it was the one time they were able to stop, catch a breath, make plans, and set up traps for the infected. During the rest of the campaign, you're always on the run, reacting to the infected and trying to move forward. So these crescendo events came out of wanting to get more of that planning and strategy into the rest of the campaign. These events also helped a bunch with team building. Like the minigun is really important, and if no one's manning it, your team probably won't do too well. But the minigunner is really vulnerable. They have a limited angle of view, they can't watch their backs anymore, so they have to depend on their teammates to cover them. With crescendo events on the way to the finale, we not only vary the pacing, but we help build the skills and coordination that will enable teams to survive the ultimate battle at the finale.
Get on with it.
At one point in the development process, playtesters told us that with the exception of the finale maps,
Notice we
found
haven't
the
seen
experience of
anything
going through a
more
campaign
from
fairly
Gabe
flat,
Newell.
with not enough peak moments. So we decided to mix up the gameplay by creating crescendo events. This generator room was one of the first maps where we
supposed to
tried
listen
one of
to
these
this
events.
first.
To proceed from this room, the survivors must turn on the power to open this door, which attracts a large horde of the infected. These crescendo events create multiple peak moments that vary the pace and intensity of the campaign, ultimately building up to the finale.
Alright. Let's do this. I've just trapped Zoe on the other side of the fire. Interesting. I like the crescendo events, but they also totally and obviously are so incredibly scripted that they happen in the exact same place always, and there's not really any variety there or randomization as to when they can happen. They don't feel specifically different enough from what you would experience whenever the AI director gets bored. And clearly when you're doing this developer commentary section, you are, see there was like a pipe bomb there last time, you are working, it is giving you these mini crescendo events normally, although it seems like in the developer commentary the AI director is just turned off and we're not seeing any of the mutants really show up.
One distinguishing characteristic about Lewis is that he represents the everyday man. While Bill and Francis are characters who obviously live on the outskirts of society, Lewis is really the only one in the group who looks like he's trying to hold on to aspects of normalcy and civilization in a world of utter chaos. Designing a sleek-fitted silhouette and adding detail elements such as designer shoes, necktie, and a designer watch not only distinguishes his character from the rest of the group, but also gives the player insight into who Lewis was prior to the apocalypse.
Yeah, but why don't we just have story or dialogue that tells us about who Lewis was? Why don't we know any of that? Like, you could have theoretically had 4 separate games where each of these were in a single player horror game and needed to survive and managed to survive, and then they met up. Or you could have 2 games where it was a multiplayer, it was a co-op game, but even in horror, co-op still doesn't really make enough sense.
Weapons here.
See, that wasn't a checkpoint,
Might need these.
which is weird, because it kind of felt like that should be a checkpoint.
Pills here.
Trying to find. See that you have some slight story in that you hear them saying, "Come to Mercy Hospital." But I also, if I'm looking for the developer commentary stuff, then I pretty much have to stay on the main path. And the easiest of the main paths. We basically saw no branching paths in Crash Course.
Weapon over here.
Let's see. Yeah, this is kind of a great example where in Mercy you have these computer things and computer monitors, and you have a different texture on the desks and different textures on the walls. And it seems like in order to have room for the trees and the bushes, they took out a lot of, they deloaded a lot of the visual textures for other things. That we saw, I don't think, any bathrooms. It would have been weird to even try and find a lot of the spawn closets, because there wasn't as much of even that available. I am stuck on the sofa because I'm standing on a sofa. That's kind of crazy that you could stand on a sofa and not even know that you were standing on one. Alright. Let's see, that's just a different way out. See, I'm not really playing this game from the perspective of trying to miss content, whereas if you were just trying to rush, that's exactly what you'll do, is you would try and skip a ton of content.
Lighting was one of our toughest challenges. We had to find a light level that was atmospheric without striking players as frustrating or unfair.
I don't think they succeeded there.
Let lighting tell the story and enhance the gameplay. Playtests proved that in a dark game, players will go wherever there's light. All we had to do was set up a few critical lights, and players are drawn to them like a moth to a bug zapper.
It's a shame you
This
can't shoot
simplified lighting
bees and set
also
off
made it easier
water
to read silhouettes
areas.
so that players could more
It's a shame
easily
that
tell
there aren't
survivors from
electrified
infected.
areas to
And the car
shock
headlights
the zombies.
proved to be one of our most flexible props, casting long dramatic shadows that tell a story of abandonment while being easily positioned to lead the survivors where we want them to go.
Feels like there should be zombies that would just kind of decide to be standing over in that general area anyways. Just so you could shoot them for fun. Would make a lot of sense if there were zombies kind of everywhere.
Usually, each model in the game has its own unique texture maps painted specifically for that model, which give the object its surface colors and detail. To have a convincing variety of cars using this method would have required as many textures as varieties of car, plus multiple duplicates of the textures in different colors, which would have been far out of our allotted texture memory budget. So we had to find a more efficient way to bring about the same result. For example, the texture on this car is shared with 3 different car models distributed throughout the environment. In addition to this one color texture, there is also a mask texture that allows each instance of the car's painted surfaces to be tinted a different color without having to author a separate texture. So for the cost of 2 textures, you can get 4 different car models in an unlimited variety of colors.
Yeah. And the fact that they're talking about that makes it seem fairly obvious to me that that is why we don't really see that many variety of cars otherwise in the next level. I think I probably need to take the sniper rifle, come to think of it, in this developer commentary so I could zoom in and look at some of these elements. There aren't probably any secret developer commentary nodes far away. It does kind of stink that you can't iron sight these guns. Like, these guns do have iron sight aiming reticles, so it would be nice if I could at least try and pull the gun close to my
Along
eyes.
with the boomer, the tank was one of our earliest bosses. Where the boomer broke the rule of shoot everything that moves, the tank changed the team's tactics to require immediate and direct cooperation against a single major threat. If everyone stays calm and engages the tank, they should be okay. If they panic and scatter, or if someone gets selfish and runs off, the team will likely die. One difficulty with the tank was that since we offset his incredible toughness by slowing him down a bit, when tank battles occurred in large outdoor spaces, he was far less effective. Coordinated survivor teams could easily take down the tank before he would close in on them and cause chaos.
It's funny they
To
didn't
offset
hold
this
him
vulnerability, we
stationary
added
so you
his
could
rock
look at
throw
him.
and car slugging abilities. Now, if the tank finds himself far away from the survivors, he can still be effective by ripping up the ground and lobbing huge rocks at them.
I don't know what the car slugging ability would be. Is that car throwing ability? Because if he picked up any of these cars, then these would have to be movable models, and that is probably beyond what they could do.
Along with the boomer, the tank
There you
was
go.
one of our earliest bosses. Where the boomer broke the rule of shoot everything that moves, the tank changed the team's tactics to require
Wow, that
immediate
one
and
died
direct
way
cooperation
quicker.
against a single major threat. If everyone stays calm and engages the tank, they should be okay. If they panic and scatter, or if someone gets selfish and runs off,
So if you want to just practice fighting the tank, you can do it at that developer commentary section, I suppose. Let's go with that. Look, there's a great example. Exact same model zombie. Exact same model zombie. Let's see. Same military guy we've seen multiple times. See, I wonder... It's really crazy you can't zoom in here. This is called Burger Tank. This I assume it's a restaurant. I can just kind of ignore it
One of the
completely.
film techniques we relied on was color correction. Color correction simplifies and unifies the visual palette. Our color correction allows us to set a specific saturation threshold
Can't
below which
move the
everything falls
camera
off
here.
towards gray, while critical items like health packs and blood stay bright and eye-catching. We also vary color correction by area. For instance, safe rooms have a warm color quality, evoking safety, in distinct contrast to the cooler palettes of the outdoors, which feel cold and forbidding.
Okay, well, these are very basic developer commentary things, and I don't know if that's for the time. That's probably what you would want to do. For a lot of people like kids, this would probably be the first time that they would go through a developer commentary. There's I guess it's a YouTube service called Masterclass that now exists, where you pay massive amounts of money, usually to get master classes basically taught to you, and certainly a programming class and a 3D video game development class would go into way more detail than these little commentary notes. These guys aren't really saying anything secret or inside. They're explaining some very basic things, for sure. And I'm not sure there really is anything in this game that
Can you lock that door?
that would
Lock the goddamn door! Stop squirming, I'm gonna heal you.
Yep, they're just gonna yell at you for not locking the door.
Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Go ahead and lock that door.
Hold still, I'm gonna heal you.
Suppose I could potentially work towards an achievement here by simply healing as many people as possible.
Can you lock that door?
Thanks. Secure that door. Let me heal you up.
I guess the question here is, if somebody is at their maximum health, can you heal them?
Hold still, I can heal you.
Yeah, you can.
Close the door,
Interesting.
please.
Patch you up.
Lock that door.
Thanks.
And notice here, you can't actually get the sniper rifle in this area.
Lock that door.
You did good.
So yeah, that's chapter 2 of the developer commentary. Yeah, I would like to see it go in more depth. I'd like to see more consistency, certainly as far as having the enemies stand still so I could look at the 3D models. Certainly, as an extra, a 3D model viewer would be nice, and that is something that is just part of the Unreal Engine, and that's definitely why you've almost certainly seen it before. Apparently, I didn't get any achievement for healing 3 teammates 6 times, or 4 times at least. But maybe that's because there is no achievement like that. Maybe that's because you have to do it in multiplayer or outside of developer commentary. But yeah, almost every Unreal game has a 3D viewer because the Unreal Engine itself has a 3D viewer. So you'll often see a case where in, say, like the Tomb Raider reboot, where you pick up 3D items and you spin them around and look at them. And there could have been some collectibles certainly in this game like that, where you pick up a teddy bear and then there's a whole story written about that item that keeps the writer employed and working, and it gives the player a reason to run into dark corners and look for collectibles. Certainly, it doesn't even have to be a side quest or mission. It could just be, here's a thing you can pick up. And we know we can pick up things because we can pick up the gas station the gas tanks and the propane tanks. So it wouldn't have been that hard to be able to pick up other items. But obviously they didn't have the time to make more 3D models, which of course if you're using the Unreal Engine nowadays, you just buy pre-made 3D models for collectibles and change them just a little bit. But they also didn't have the video RAM budget to have unique collectibles, whereas that's not really a problem nowadays on modern engines. And inherently, a lot of what's lacking in Left 4 Dead is highlighting the flaws of the source engine as it is, which at its time, 13 years ago, it was a fine engine, I'm sure, but now it's completely outclassed. And yeah, the only thing Valve could have done to stop that from happening was to make more games or open source their engine so that other people could make more games with it. They did eventually get to nearly that point where you can use the source engine to make like pretty much any game you want as long as you sell less than 10,000 copies, I believe is the offer now. And then you have to pay a license after every sale after the first 10,000 copies, or and I'm picking up 10,000 out of the air. It could have been 1 million units sold. But they did that, I think about in 2019, maybe 2018. Far, far too late for it to matter. If they had released the orange box and, say, waited 4 years to think that they actually were going to get Half-Life 2 Episode 3 out, at that point, that would have been the point to say, all right, we're going to let the source engine be used by smaller developers while there's still some life in it. But instead, they stupidly kept thinking or pretending like they were working on Half-Life 2 Episode 3 until they finally gave up on that and said, well, we're going to just make Half-Life 3 instead because it's been so long. And then they finally pretty much have given up on that, although Valve still pretends like they're going to make a new Half-Life game at some point that is in the mainline story. And they did, to their fairness, make Half-Life Alyx, but I wouldn't be surprised if the engine that Half-Life Alyx, the VR game, was running on is barely running on something called Source 2. I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually running on its own custom code that would be fairly useless in any other implementations. And the thing that Valve and the Source engine was all about was physics engines in an era when physics engines were pretty rudimentary. But now physics engines are a solved problem for the most part, and there's no more physics really to add or create. So they failed to pivot to either thinking about a new engine. It would be a much different story if the Source engine was the engine that introduced ray tracing, and it introduced it 5 years earlier than NVIDIA graphics cards and Unreal implemented ray tracing. And even ray tracing, which was in one generation only going to work with the newest of the newest NVIDIA graphics cards, was then immediately turned into just code that could work on any sufficiently strong enough graphics card. So selling a game on a new gimmick is just not something that you can do in modern time. Nobody's going to buy a new Tomb Raider game because the hair effects look better. Whereas that was a selling point for several of the Tomb Raider games, is that Lara Croft's hair had more strands of hair that would actively animate and draw and look and feel like real hair. Nobody's likely to buy a game solely on ray tracing, because even though ray tracing got a lot of press when it first came out, it came at a very high cost as far as frame rate, and nowadays players are much more aware that they want a higher and consistent frame pacing above anything else. And horror games in particular aren't going to really succeed that much with ray tracing as much as a open world or moody game would succeed with that. Is there anything else to say here, or am I just dragging this out? I guess I'm probably just dragging this out. I wouldn't be surprised, as we keep coming back to this main menu, if every single character we see on this screensaver is all the models of the zombies. So 6, 7, maybe 8 different models in total. They're all gray. So there is a statement here for some possible different diversity that could happen. Although even the zombie game Days Gone had every character gray, and people kind of complained about that. And I don't think that it would particularly be that much better if there were minority zombies. Although in 2021, it probably is the right way to go. There probably should be some minority representation in the bad guys. Treating people differently and with kids gloves, infantilization of minorities is as objectionable as not including them in the first place. Plus, that would at least change the game up if you had a African black-skinned zombie running around in a dark forest. They would be more difficult to shoot, and there definitely could be some interesting story there. I'm also realizing that this is the helicopter crash of the second story, so even before you play the game, you know the helicopter is going to probably crash, and so that whole first segment is kind of pointless. And this definitely was the screensaver, so it's not like it's changing the background after you complete a specific segment. Yeah. Is there anything else to say? I think if we're going to talk about offensiveness too, there is something in the fact that the witch is naked or in her underwear when none of the other zombies are anything short of being completely fully clothed. You might have more gore in a game like this, although you probably would want to also target the secondary Japanese market, so any gore you added you'd have to then remove for it to be sold in Japan, because they don't like disembowelment or beheading and things like that. Anything that's particularly gory is not approved by their ratings board. But yeah, a Dead Space technology of limb dismemberment on regular zombies would have been interesting, certainly, because we only get to see that in the necromorphs that are very, very far away from looking like humans most of the time. But yeah, I could probably throw out 1,000 ideas that aren't in this game, and I could probably go through the list of first-person shooters and games that existed before this game came out where that would have had some of those ideas. But I'll leave it at that. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.